Regional weekend is officially in the books as 4 SEC teams have punched their tickets to the Super Regionals. We are here breaking down and reacting to the weekend that was as 13 SEC baseball teams enter and now just 4 remain on the road to Omaha. Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Phillips. He is Harrison Fant. This is the Windup, SEC Unfiltered's bi-weekly college baseball show, the best college baseball show on the internet. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in, guys. As always, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on notifications. Check us out via podcast, where we get your podcasts. You can also find us across all social media platforms, as well as our website, secunfiltered.com. And as always, we're powered by our friends over at FANDUEL. Visit FANDUEL.com/SECU to join today and get started with $250 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet. Once again, that's FANDUEL.com/SECU to get $250 in bonus bets today. 13 SEC baseball teams entered the regional round, and just 4 remain punching their tickets to the Super Regionals, that being LSU, Arkansas, Tennessee, and Auburn. We are here reacting to and breaking down the weekend that was, and not just the SEC, but the college baseball landscape as well. I am Chris Phillips. Joining me, as he always does here on the Windup, my good friend, co-host, and colleague, Harrison Fant, joining the show. Harrison, what's going on, man? I appreciate you taking the time. Excited to chat with you, buddy. We have got a lot to break down, a lot to discuss, an exciting weekend, a very unexpected weekend for the SEC, no doubt.
Yeah, exciting and unexpected is the best way to put it, because of the thrill that the games we got were in so many facets of it, but an unexpected weekend in which the SEC really struggled in. I'm not going to say showed, their bad side, but just kind of didn't play up to the expectations that we had going into, the postseason and the regional rounds. But man, I mean, it's college baseball and anything can happen in the postseason, especially. And, we know that. And it really showed the world that this weekend.
Harrison, on that note, because we're going to go regional by regional here, obviously, and if you're tuned into this, you're a diehard college baseball fan, you know what went down over the weekend, Harrison. Again, 13 teams enter that qualified for the postseason tournament from the SEC, just 4 remaining. Harrison, I want to get your take on it because I've voiced, my opinions on social media, but I think, long story short, I think we have to admit it was a bad weekend for the SEC. I mean, is that fair? Is that being too harsh? Because, to give people some perspective, I was looking back at last year, Harrison. Only 5 SEC teams punched their ticket to the Supers, but we had 4 make it to Omaha, so it felt like, hey, the SEC obviously dominated the postseason. We had 2 in the national title. Of course, Vols won it all. So it felt like the SEC ran the postseason. So the amount of teams that are actually making it to the Supers is not that much different, but I still feel like as a whole, it was a pretty tough weekend for the league and a tough look for the conference. What say you?
Absolutely. I mean, yes, the SEC had the most teams of any conference in the postseason. And a lot of people were kind of griping about that on social media. Like, oh, should the SEC have gotten that many bids? They took away, they put in average, league average SEC teams versus, other teams that were, or should have been more than deserving, this, that, the other. I mean, there is a case for that. I mean, there's also the case that, the SEC is the best and toughest conference across the board throughout the entire regular season. And the postseason has proved it the past 5 years with 5 straight national champions from the SEC from 5 different programs in a row. So, I mean, there's arguments for both sides. I mean, but when you look at it, Chris, regional results by conference, SEC went 27-20 this weekend. ACC 22-10, Big 12 11-12, Big 10 6-6, Big West 4-4, Sun Belt 6-2, American 5-2, Independence, so basically Oregon State 4-1, Conference USA 1-4, the OVC Ohio Valley Conference 3-2, the Missouri Valley Conference 3-1, Big East and Horizon both went 2-2. And obviously a lot of other smaller ones went 1-2 and then 0-2.
I think that tells the tale right there. And again, you get the most teams in the regionals. You're probably going to stack more losses, but still a 27-20 record. Certainly, again, not what we expected. And Harrison, on that note, again, we got 16 regionals to talk about, so let's do it. and starting on maybe the most disappointing team of the weekend. You could argue, certainly there's a couple teams you can make that case for. The number 1 overall national seed, the Nashville Regional. It's the Louisville Cardinal coming out of this regional with the regional victory, advancing the Supers. Vanderbilt, Harrison, a really, really disappointing showing. They are the first number 1 overall national seed, of course, in this new format we have, obviously, but the first overall number 1 national seed, not even to make the regional final. And I was warned by some of my Vandy buddies, hey, and some others too, maybe you're apologizing or tipping the cap a little bit early to Tim Corbin. And I still say, hey, listen, they put together a season. They earned the number 1 overall national seed. They won the SEC tournament. I don't regret doing that, but it was like Vandy fans' worst nightmares came to fruition. Again, Louisville navigates through. They win the regional. A really, really disappointing end for the number 1 overall national seed. Your thoughts on what went down in Nashville over the weekend?
Disappointment went down in Nashville. And like you said, I mean, Vanderbilt's the first team since 1999 to be the number 1 overall seed and not make it to the regional final. Regional final. Unbelievable. Just on the wrong side of history that you don't want to be on. And Vanderbilt was on it this year. Tim Corbin, after what was one of the best, second halves of the season, just kind of quiet ascensions of a season throughout the last, half of the regular season and the postseason, going through the SEC tournament with a double bye, which was super helpful, winning the SEC tournament. And that does mean something. I will say that it's different and doesn't mean as much as the regular season SEC crown that Texas won, but it is obviously, I think, important. And, some context, maybe that played into, how they played in the regional this weekend. Just, yes, they only played 3 games, but you're playing on Sunday, versus teams that haven't played, since Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, or I guess Friday or Saturday, maybe. But man, I mean, I think it's even worse, Chris, to do it and you lose in the fashion in which they did. I'm going to say that it's the second most disappointing regional of a 1 seed that fell. I'm going to put Oregon at number 1. You host a regional and you go 2-Q in your own regional in a way that they should not have gotten. And we can talk about that briefly if you want, but I think Vanderbilt's right behind them just because you lose to your rival Louisville. You lose from the midweek right before, the last couple weeks of the season, and then you host them in a regional and you lose to them, and then you get about no hit almost through 8 innings, Chris, versus a soft throw and lefty that I think it was a lefty in Griffin Page throwing 86, 88 and just dicing 8 innings of 1 run, 1 hit baseball from a solo shot in the elimination game. And just, you're like, dang, like, man, it's so frustrating to see, especially with, where the offense started and kind of how it grew throughout the season, let alone the pitching. What we thought had the deepest pitching staff in this regional by far. And it just felt like such an utter disappointment and a way to go out in that loser's bracket, especially, but on top of it, just not even making the regional final, let alone making it to a super regional.
And Harrison, it was the thing that worried us about Vandy the entire season that bit him. It was the hitting. I mean, it just, you look at the scores of the games. I mean, dude, they were getting no hit through 6, I believe it was, in game 1 against Wright State. It took some big time heroics to win that one. They win that one 4-3. And then you look at the scores. I mean, you lose to Louisville 3-2, and then you get Wright State again and lose to them 5-4. I
guess if you could take the under in every game in this regional, you would have won every game. I think the most run score was Wright State in the first elimination game against ETSU was 7-5.
Yeah, it just, with this Vandy team, they were always walking such a tightrope and a narrow pathway, and it was the bats that were not showing up for them.
Actually, Louisville scored 8 runs in their first game, but like I don't think anyone expected Louisville to kind of cakewalk through this. It feels like, and I'm not gonna say cakewalk easily, but just like it felt like under the radar almost.
Yeah, you swept through it. I mean,
yeah, you win a tight game, in a 3-2 matchup and the 1-0 matchup versus Vanderbilt, and then you handle Wright State 6-0. It's just disappointment, I think, is the word for it, and just kind of under, I guess, delivering for Vanderbilt.
Yeah. Oh, number 1 overall national seed. I mean, it's an incredibly disappointing weekend, especially, again, with some of the outings you got from some of your pitchers. Your arms did their job. It's just your bats that fall short. And again, I think this team's, their offensive ceiling being as low as it was, again, at times got hot down the stretch, but
I mean, they run ruled Tennessee, Chris.
I just, for me though, it was like, it was always a big if they keep swinging it the way they have been. But you always had that fear, at least I did, in the back of your mind, that this offense could revert back. And especially in the postseason where it feel like the pitching gets better. I didn't have a great feeling after game one, to be totally honest, when you had a Wright State pitcher that came in with an almost a 5 ERA, was throwing a no-no against you. And probably the only reason you beat Wright State is because Wright State's coach.
He had a 9 ERA.
Was it a 9? Okay. Well, the guy inexplicably, their head coach inexplicably takes this guy out when he's throwing a no-hitter. One of the craziest coaching decisions I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just a disappointing weekend in Nashville.
And it was at like 75 pitches too.
Yeah. Pitch count wasn't an issue, but again, it's just for the Vandy boys.
I think obviously Wright State's a good force team. We've talked about them, previewing the regional, but I was more concerned, and thought a bigger threat would be ETSU, which is how they've played against elite level competition, is how much they can slug it. So, and they went in 2-Q, so a little surprising on that end, but man, I mean, just the way that they lost that elimination game, I think is just the nail in the coffin.
Yeah.
And Chris, you talk about how we talked about Vanderbilt, like the ceiling is the pitching staff, the floor and how far that their season will go and how deep in the postseason is based on the offense and the production they get out of it. Yep. Number 2, national seed, Texas, exact same thing that we're about to get into.
Yeah, Bats just didn't show up for the Vandy boys, and their season ends on their home field, again, as the number 1 overall national seed, not even making the regional final. Harrison, let's keep it moving. Let's go over to Hattiesburg, which is who obviously Louisville will face off against the winner of that regional. Miami comes out of Hattiesburg. It'll be an ACC on ACC showdown in the Supers. Alabama, tough showing for them, going 2-Q yet again. I believe it's the second straight year for the Crimson Tide that Rob Vaughn's club have gone 2-Q. They lose that first game to Miami 5-3. Almost hit a walk-off. That ball literally caught at the track that would have walked it off for the Crimson Tide, then lose to Southern Miss 6-5 in their next game. Again, 2-Q. Miami wins the regional. I mean, Harrison, for Alabama, I wasn't, Southern Miss was my pick. So I wasn't totally shocked to see Alabama get knocked out. Just another kind of middle-of-the-pack SEC team that had a tough weekend. Your thoughts on what went down in Hattiesburg as Bama's season comes to an end?
Yeah, just kind of the disappointment that we've seen from Bama throughout the season when they've struggled, and it's been the offensive production. I mean, you've had Justin LeBron struggles throughout the year, up and down, after such a hot start that he had. It's just, I was more worried about the pitching staff, I think, than the offense. And the pitching staff really shined and I think carried them, the 2 games and gave them a chance. I mean, you give up 5 runs to Miami, and you give up 6 to Southern Miss as a whole, but you can't score more than 5 runs. Like in a regional game, Chris, like more often than not, you're gonna have to score 6 or more runs to win a game, especially deep in the regional games when we've seen it. I mean, we'll talk about the Oxford Regional, like when pitching comes down to, whoever's available, who can throw, who is, healthy enough to throw. When you're going through everyone twice, probably, you got to rely on the offensive production. Bama just didn't have much of any of that. I mean, yes, you have to face Southern Miss in an elimination game. Like we all thought that was gonna be the 1-0 game. I mean, and you got to face their stout lineup and, pitching staff. And it was just an unfortunate series of events, I think, for Bama that just didn't have either facet of the game live up to what we've seen them being able to do. But we have seen them been doing this throughout the seasons here and there. And I mean, I went with Bama just from not an SEC standpoint, but I was like, I just don't think Southern Miss is going to pull out. Something else is going to happen. There's going to be upsets. We talked about this, it's not going to be, and it clearly hasn't been, Chris, kind of a 1-2 seed just taking every regional, or, the 1 seed's kind of sweeping their way through most of the regionals like we did last year. It felt like for the majority of, I think, all 16 regionals, it felt overwhelmingly 1 seed heavy that made it out. But I don't know. I mean, I said in our preview, Chris, about how I said, Miami, you don't know which version of Miami you're going to get. I mean, they're on the cold spell to end the season, Chris. I mean, we talk about game 1 of the ACC tournament. They get blown out by Cal at a 6 a.m. Pacific local time for Cal, flying across country to play in Durham. I mean, I said they weren't going to know which kind of version Miami are going to get. They obviously got, Miami's best version, and Miami went on just this huge run. And, after the game 1 of the regional final championship in which they lost 17-6, like what a way to bounce back for them. I mean, to win a tight ball game at Southern Miss too. I mean, that's just a gritty performance that, we didn't get from Alabama this week in the regional and kind of have seen too much down the stretch.
Yeah, Harrison, you mentioned, I mean, they get Southern Miss in the elimination game. You know, you got your guy Oz in there, and he's got 11 walks on the season. He comes in, he walks 3 guys. You know, you lose a game late. I mean, listen, Alabama's lack of pitching depth, their bullpen struggles was a big part of what defined them this season, and certainly it showed itself in the region. And that's the thing, too. When you get in the postseason, Harrison, like all these little things that have haunted you, they really – they reveal themselves. Like who you are is who you are. You get revealed, especially when you play really good competition. And, you know, not that Bama played bad, but it was kind of the story of what Alabama was this season. Really good at times, but inconsistent. And obviously Miami is able to win that regional. Hattiesburg, a crazy regional again where Columbia beat Southern Miss in the first game, 11-4. I mean, it was chaos everywhere.
It wasn't even a close game. It was 11-4. They really broke that one away. So it was like, yeah, man, this just kind of regional was a disaster. It felt like it was just up for grabs for anyone.
Yeah. And again, you mentioned that's probably one of the most disappointing parts for Bama. You feel like it was up for grabs and you're not able to take advantage of it.
I mean, I thought it was a really good draw for Bama too. Honestly, a really good draw.
Yeah. Not even able to win a game. So, Harrison, let's move to the Tallahassee Regional, where no surprises here. Florida State comes out on top and they win. Mississippi State from the SEC, they trounced Northwestern in their first game, 11-2, lose to Florida State in their second game, 10-3, a game that was close but got away from them late. Then beat Northeastern in the elimination game, 3-2. They get Florida State again. Again, really, really fun game. Ligon for Mississippi State was really fiery. It was fun to watch, but Florida State able to prevail. Not totally shocking. I think you and I both obviously went Florida State. And then the bigger news, we already talked about it right after this happens. Obviously, Brian O'Connor gets announced as the head coach. Less than an hour after it was the season concluded. Thoughts on the Tallahassee Regional, Harrison? I mean, again, I'm not really surprised by the final result here. I was surprised Pico Khan got shelled. That really stunned me. And that was, I'll tell you this, Harrison, from a greater overarching perspective. That was something I noticed is the amount of aces that got touched up this weekend. Like, I feel like there were a lot of guys that were either saved or just, like, you looked across the country, there were so many games where it was like 4-0, 5-0 in the first inning. Like, a lot of teams were jumping all over these starters. Pico Khan was one of them, so that's disappointing, and I think obviously that's a big part of where you lost the regional. But all in all, Harrison, for the season that was, Mississippi State was playing with house money. You got a new head coach now. You don't really lose anything. Thoughts on the Tallahassee Regional and obviously Florida State coming out on top?
Yeah, I mean, we both picked Florida State for a reason. I think they had, the best offense and highest floor of an offense, and pitchings have to go with that. Headlined by Jamie Arnold, who really shoved against Mississippi State. He really did. I mean, 7 innings, 5 hits, 3 earned, 13 strikeouts, 2 walks. Like, yeah, I gave it 3 runs, but it was in 7 innings. Like, and then, Joe Charles comes in behind him and slams the door with 2 no-hit innings, 3 strikeouts. But Pico Khan getting touched up a lot. I mean, maybe one of his worst outings of the year, 3 2/3, 6 hits, 7 earned, 4 walks, 7 Ks, just the time that you need him most. And you don't have the offense behind him to back it up. I mean, you have it in game 1 against Northeastern, but I mean, it just kind of falls off and not able to support the pitching staff that, Evan Sierra, Nate Williams, Stone Simmons and guys behind them that, gave you a chance. I mean, Carson Ligon, Luke Dawson, guys giving you a chance, and just kind of the offense. We talked about this, how streaky this offense has been, Chris, and just when offenses, need to explode in the postseason. They really do, especially in a tournament format like this, because of, the depths of pitching you usually go to. Mississippi State not going to as much depths as a lot of other programs and teams, but, just not able. I don't want to say playing with house money, because I think that's a little much of a stretch, but just playing, more free and loose and just kind of, with, I don't want to say any expectations, but just like people already kind of checking out of the season, it feels like, outside of, people in the program and, in that locker room and clubhouse. But I think you got to give them credit too for how they played in the regional. I thought they played Florida State tough in the last game, even though it was, a 5-2 game. I liked what you saw, from Carson Ligon, like you said, and just the offense had some sparks here and there, but just wasn't enough. I mean, it's just one of those things. I felt like they were overpowered, and, Florida State played the level of baseball we've seen them play a lot this season, and, prove why they were a national seed and a host. And, just a good season, I think, considering where they were in April, how they turned things around, where their season ended. I think from that point forward, it was a successful season considering the first part before that, when, everything was just spiraling, it felt like. And then once Chris Lemonis was let go of his duties, it just feels like it was an uphill climb for them. They managed to, attack and really, battle uphill and find some direction and just sense of energy and rebirth in the program's direction. And now, obviously, with Brian O'Connor being named, I thought that was, like I said, really bad taste of how they did that, and kind of really dirty to Justin Parker, I think, too. And doing that less than an hour after the game. But I mean, and it's not my call to make or, decision, but I think there's a lot of excitement around, the future Mississippi State with the pieces that they're going to have in the program and, leading the program as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's unfortunate is that, especially like you mentioned, Harrison, if you're Justin Parker, one of those guys on this club, and, I just think it's almost like Mississippi State was so ready to get to the new era, the next chapter, they really didn't let – not that, again, their what they did on their timeline affected like whether they were going to beat Florida State or not, but it was obviously somewhat of a distraction. Justin Parker talked about it. It was a distraction. It was just something else externally they were having to deal with, obviously. So it is a shame that it's like you didn't even really give room for this to breathe, to see if this team could go on a run. You were just so – I think they would have just ended the season before the regional if they could have. Like, they're just like, we're ready for the next chapter so badly.
Chris, imagine if they go on and win that regional. Like, is that still announced then? Because it got leaked that the Maroon airplane was on the way to Charlottesville.
Yeah, I don't
it was on the way there during the game.
Know. That's a great question. I don't know.
Like,
I don't
could you imagine that?
Yeah, I don't know. But either way, I mean, again, like you said, it was a heck of a season for Mississippi State, the way they turned it around. Good showing, but like you and I expected, Florida State on their home field especially, just too much. So Seminoles will advance to the Super Regional. Harrison, the team that they will face, let's go to the Corvallis Regional. It wasn't easy for Oregon State. They lose game 1 to St. Mary's 6-4, but they worked their way out of the losers bracket, beating TCU. St. Mary's, again, they beat them, by the way, the second time they played them, Harrison, 20-3. They then go win 2 games against USC, 14-1 and 9-0. So it took that St. Mary's loss to jumpstart them or what have you for some reason, and they were off and running after that. Harrison, your thoughts on, again, I think both of us, I had Oregon State, you had TCU, by the way. I hate to remind you of that. But the way that it happened, certainly not what I expected or even you expected. Thoughts on what we saw in Corvallis and Oregon State coming out of the regional and now hosting the Super against FSU?
I think you really saw the offensive production on a national scale that Oregon State has and, produces, and obviously more so the environment that they can host, and that, Oregon State is a baseball program that a lot of people don't, keep an eye on just because they're in the PNW, especially now that they're an independent. But like you said, that loss to St. Mary's in the first round, I mean, really just, I think was a reality check for them. Like, we can't go 0-2 at home like Oregon did, obviously, not to mention that again. But I did pick TCU. I just thought, I thought they were going to kind of quietly walk into this regional and, surprise some people and just really keep up offensively with Oregon State. Obviously, they didn't do that, losing 7-2, but surprising to see TCU go 0-2 the way that they were playing down the stretch, especially in the conference tournament. But Oregon State, just the production, and I talk about how you need your offense to really support you and I think carry you more so than the pitching staff in the postseason, because it feels so much more inconsistent pitching staffs doing the postseason than offensive lineups. Because if you can swing it and score, 10 runs a game, or 10 runs in a situation in which you're not getting your best ball, someone can step up. Someone with a 9 ERA, a 5 ERA can step up and in a moment which you need them and potentially slow down another team's offense or slam the door. We've seen it all across the country this weekend in the regionals. And, when you have an offense like Trent Caraway, who just felt like he was seeing beach balls at the plate. I think he had 4 home runs in 4 straight games. I mean, the offense production that he had, Avia Arquette, Easton Tall, they have, in the head of their lineup and in the one hole, you got AJ Singer, who, Gavin Turley, guys that produce at such a high level for them that, I was really impressed to see that be on a consistent, basis for them. Jacob Craig, their first baseman, the bottom of their order, had a lot of production too. But when you get a guy like, James DeCreamer to go and kind of pitch in a big situation, which they need to, and beat Southern Cal twice, Chris, that was really impressive, because we talk about how important it is to go 1-0 in the regionals, right? What is it? I think it's 85% of teams that win the regional go 1-0, and 93% of teams that go 2-0 win the regional. And that's over 400, sample size. I mean, how monumentally important that is. And for Oregon State to drop their first game to a 4 seed at home, fight their way and slug their way back to the losers bracket, Chris, and win a regional and defy that large of odds, you got to give them their props, their kudos. And, Oregon State's hosting a super regional for a reason. And, they're a baseball program for a reason. And they got a talented lineup of a lot of guys that are just gritty and can compete and swing the hell out of the ball.
Yeah, you mentioned the offensive explosion. Oregon State scores 4 runs in that first game in which they lose 6-4. Harrison, the next 4 games, they score 50 runs. So something woke them up. That lost to St. Mary's.
Some voodoo on the bats or something.
Yeah, it got the sticks going. The boys rally. And again, I wasn't surprised Oregon State won the regional, but certainly the way they did it, really, really impressive. And that Oregon State-Florida State Super, going to be a lot of fun out there in Corvallis. Harrison, let's go to the Chapel Hill Regional, where North Carolina wins this one. They come out. They will advance the Supers. The Oklahoma Sooners from the SEC, I'd say a pretty solid showing, beat Nebraska game 1, 7-4. Harrison, they saved Kyson Witherspoon. So it worked, right? They beat Nebraska with Malachi on the bump. They saved Kyson for game 2. Didn't go so well. UNC wins that game 11-5. They jumped all over them early. There were some errors in that game. Kyson Witherspoon just not as sharp as one. I think UNC just obviously flexing their offensive prowess and why so many people are high on them. A lot of people picking them to win the national championship. So Oklahoma loses that one 11-5. They then do bounce back. They beat Nebraska 17-1. Harrison. Then take down North Carolina 9-5 to force a Monday winner-take-all game. UNC able to win that one, pull away 14-4. Thoughts on this one? I mean, I thought it was a solid showing for Skip Johnson's club. It was a tough draw. Like you and I talked about, really, really tough draw. This was going to be one of the ones where I was really going to be really surprised if Oklahoma came out of this regional. So I don't want to say it's not disappointing, but the fact they took on a Monday, I thought even was impressive, especially we talked about it. How important is it when they win when Kyson's on the bump? If you'd have told me they go 0-1 and Kyson start and still make it to Monday, I would have told you that's a pretty incredible weekend. Your thoughts on what took place?
Yeah, honestly, I thought it was a really impressive weekend from a standpoint of they're facing the number 5 team in the nation that is a legit number 5 national championship team contention. And just because they're not in the SEC doesn't mean that's not true, because North Carolina is on all facets of the ball. They have one of the best pitchers in the country on their team. I mean, they have Jason Akera, who's their number 2, it feels like now. And you have Jake Knapp, who is a Golden Spike semifinalist. I mean, one of the best pitchers in the country for a reason. And, he was warming up in the last game. He was like, I want to come in. And they're up huge, in that winner-take-all game 7. But I was honestly impressed with the pitching staff. And I know outside of North Carolina, which they played 3 times, you play Nebraska and Holy Cross, or you play Nebraska, beats Holy Cross. But I thought the pitching staff overwhelmingly did a really good job. I mean, Malachi, 6 innings of 3 hit, no run baseball, 9 Ks, 2 walks, like just exactly what you needed for him to step up in one of the biggest situations of the season. And then Kyson Witherspoon start, which was super weird. And I say that because 4 innings, 10 hits, 9 runs, only 3 earned, just because of, errors and whatnot, but only 4 strikeouts, 3 walks, just a super weird start. But like you said, for them to win Kyson Witherspoon's start it's just so monumentally important that I was shocked too, to kind of, if you look at it, just sitting a blank check after of here are the box scores, here's the results. They lost Kyson Witherspoon's start. They're in the game 7 regional final. I'd be surprised. And I thought it because, maybe he throws a 6 or 7 inning 1-run game. They lose that. Okay, maybe. Sure. And they don't use a lot of pitching, but it really just came down to North Carolina's offense stepping up, and especially stepping up that game 7, Chris, after losing 9-5 in your home field in Chapel Hill. And Chapel Hill is a Chapel Thrill. We know it's Chapel Thrill for a reason from last year with LSU, obviously, but I mean, it is a home atmosphere ballpark for UNC, and for them to explode in a game 7 like they did, offensive production wise, after North Carolina has this huge game that they force a game 7 with Cade Crosland going out there and shoving. I mean, stepping up, another guy stepping up exactly when he needed to. 7 innings, 5 hits, 1 run, 0 earned runs, 9 Ks, 2 walks, and saving, as much bullpen as you can, because everyone has to feel like they're available then, because your season's on the line, and, Michael Catalano just coming in after and slamming the door. Obviously, then you have, what I was really surprised, Chris, which is I thought they handled the pitching staff really well in that game 1 of the finals for Oklahoma with Jaden Barfield starting, and he gave you really good length, gave you an opportunity, kept you in the game. James gets hit around a little bit, no pun intended. But it just, your offense picked up. You picked up the slack where it was with, Harris, Dickerson, Willits, just guys like that stepping up when they needed to and forcing that game 7. And just, it felt like Oklahoma kind of ran out of steam. They just didn't have the arms that felt like that North kind of had that stepped up and, pitched their best baseball when they needed to. And I think playing in that environment was tough too. I really do. And just like I said, I think they kind of ran out of steam, and just North Carolina's offense just full throttle, full on the gas, and just showed why they are a number 5 team in the country and a legit national championship contender team.
Yeah, again, Oklahoma, good showing. UNC, I think, just on a different level. Truly, I think one of the favorites to win the national championship. Going on the road to their place always was going to be tough. Valiant effort by the Sooners and Skip Johnson's club, but season ending there in Chapel Hill. Haberson, the team that North Carolina will face in the Supers in Chapel Hill is certainly not the one that you expected. This was one of, and again, I'm not here to pat myself on the back because you get some right, you get some wrong. I picked the Vandy boys, for example, and they don't get out of their own regional. But this is one I'm impressed with myself that I was able to get right, because Arizona goes into Eugene and they pull the upset. And you mentioned Harrison a few times. Oregon goes 2-Q in their own regional out in Eugene. They lose to Utah Valley 6-5. Then lose to Cal Poly 10-8, and their season comes to an abrupt end. Meanwhile, it's Arizona beating Cal Poly 3-2, beating Utah Valley 14-4, and then beating Cal Poly 14-0. Harrison, outside of that first game, which was close, Arizona pretty much dominates and runs through Eugene. Really impressive weekend. I don't know what's a bigger storyline here, Harrison, the fact that Arizona won the regional, the fact that Oregon went 2-Q, essentially. Your thoughts on what you saw from Eugene? I know this one really surprised you.
Yeah, I think it surprised me more so. I think it's definitely more that Oregon went 2-Q in the regional at home than Arizona winning the regional, because Arizona played super well down the stretch. I believe they won the Big 12 championship tournament, correct?
Yes.
I believe that's correct. And
yes,
just how they were playing down the stretch at the end of the season, and, a really good ball club that's we see all the time in the postseason. When we've seen Jay Johnson came over there and just what he was able to do there, and what Arizona feels kind of like a West Coast, I don't want to say sleeping giant, but just flies on the radar a lot because they're so good. They're just that West Coast, after dark, because it's not Pac-12 after dark anymore. And, you see them play in the postseason so much. It just feels like a staple there. And Oregon really just crapped the bed, it felt like. You got the home run leader in college baseball, Mason Neville. And, outside of that, just you don't have much production. You have Drew Smith, who gives you a little bit. But just to go 0-2 against, Utah Valley and Cal Poly. And Cal Poly's a really good team. And Utah Valley went and played their guts out. They played their hearts out and just outdid them. Honestly, you put 6 on, I'm not going to say Oregon's ace, but Jason Ritz, and who put 14 Ks up, but you put 6 on him in 6 innings and just showed that anything can happen in the postseason. And just, I think more so that Oregon got shut out in game 2, not shut out in game 2, but just kind of shelled in game 2 from their guy, Grayson Grinsell, who is one of the best pitchers in the country, just a big name arm in the country, who goes 6 innings, 7 hits, 6 earned. That's your ace. Backs against the wall and your ace, that happens. That's just so defeating, demoralizing. You get to Cal Poly's, ace, and I believe in Josh Voldmeradig, but you just get outslugged in 2 games and just at home. And what that meant, I think that was just more of a disappointing into a season for Oregon than Vanderbilt because of that. You're hosting, you go 0-2 and just didn't feel like, you really had a chance. But that, I will say, in that game 1, the 6-5 loss Utah Valley, which I know you probably saw it. I know everyone else probably saw it, as widespread as it was. The trucking call at home that changed the landscape of that game in I think the 8th inning, that the catcher misses the ball that's coming in. He's blocking the plate, and it kicks off the glove, and then horrible slide. I will say horrible slide. I think it was like he didn't decide what he was going to do, really run the guy over or slide. He kind of just knee slid into him with his chest up, and super unintentional. But you make it to a situation in which he has to run outside the base path and try to hook slide around home, if anything. Like, I get the whole posy rule, but like, there's got to be some discretion in there. And he wasn't trying to run over the catcher. And he didn't have the ball, he's blocking the play. So that changed the aspect of that game. And I think from that point, just the momentum on all Utah Valley, they close it off in the ninth to just decimate, it feels like, Oregon's hopes and try to fight back from the loser's bracket. And then just after that, losing to Cal Poly, just defeating for them, obviously, for sure. But I think you got to give props to Arizona for honestly getting to run through the regional and not even have to play Oregon. Honestly, because I thought that was a matchup everyone was looking forward to. I was looking forward to. And, you blow the doors off of Utah Valley 14-4, and then you blow the doors off and skunk Cal Poly 14-0. Just the offensive production that they put up, I think, was impressive. But just, I'm not going to put an asterisk on it, but just like they didn't have to play Oregon, which everyone was looking for that matchup, and just kind of Grayson Grinsell versus Arizona's lineup. I commend you, Chris. That was a really good pick. I think you got lucky too, them not having to play Oregon. That would have been so much fun to watch. But I mean, you got to give kudos to Arizona for going out there and, playing the team that's in front of them and then coming out on top. And the production they got from their lineup, Chris, the production that they put out, I'm not going to say overshine the pitching staff, but like when you put up 14 runs in a game, you put up double digits, you expect to win. You really do. And, their bullpen really slammed the door, I think, in that game too. And it really catapulted them into the super regional round.
Yeah, everybody wants to talk about this weekend about how bad the SEC looked and all the upsets. Well, they weren't the only ones because Oregon went down 2 in Q. So it took place all over the country. But like you said, really impressive showing by Arizona. Crazy to think the first game essentially I attended this season was Arizona was playing and they got shelled and didn't think much of them then. It just goes to show how much teams can change. And obviously that Arizona team now headed to the Supers. They will take on North Carolina in Chapel Hill. Will be a tough matchup for them, but if this postseason has taught us anything at this point, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? Harrison, let's go to Conway, South Carolina, where the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers navigate their way through the regional, make pretty easy work. They go 3-0, sweep through it, beat Fairfield 10-2, beat Coastal Carolina beat East Carolina 18-7, and then beat East Carolina again 1-0 in the final. The Florida Gators, though, for the SEC, just got off to a bad start, Harrison, and never recovered. Liam Peterson just gets shelled in that first game out of the gate. They lose 11-6. They do bounce back. They beat Fairfield 17-2. Aiden King dazzled. He was brilliant. A lot of Florida fans feel like they shouldn't have thrown him in that game, but it's neither here nor there. They then start Pierce Capala in the next one against East Carolina. And Harrison, East Carolina just kicked their ass again. They beat their ass twice, 11-4 the final. Obviously, we know about all the extracurricular stuff, and I think the thing that's kind of become the bigger storyline from the regional than anything else with Kevin O'Sullivan, he's issued an apology since. We're not going to dive in the details of all that. Either way, Coastal Carolina wins the regional. Florida goes 1-2. Harrison, this was one you and I both picked the Gators, and we felt good about it. And I'll say this. Number one, I stand by what I said. If you ask Florida, if you go back, if they could change anything, the draw was good. It was. It wasn't as hard as going to Chapel Hill. It wasn't as hard as going out west. It wasn't as hard as going to Tallahassee. The draw was good. Florida played like shit and got their ass whooped. I mean, those two things are mutually exclusive. And Harrison, I'm not trying to turn this into moving the goalposts or like, let's change the expectations at Florida or whatever. But like, I do think now that the dust has settled on their season, you really do have to take a step back and say, man, like for all the injuries they sustained, they probably got further than they should have. We talk about Mississippi State and what they did, and that was really admirable. Obviously, your head coach being fired and you turn it around. I mean, for Florida to lose all the guys they did early and then late to lose Luke Heyman and Colby Shelton and still manage a way to go, 500 in SEC play, make a regional, to even have a shot to go any further. I do think you have to tip the cap. We've talked a lot about Kevin O'Sullivan, his best coaching job yet. Obviously, the way the regional ended and certainly some of the actions from him and some of the emotions getting away from him, he's not happy about. They're not happy about. But again, all in all, Coastal wins it. They deserved it. your thoughts on what we saw over the weekend, especially from the Florida perspective.
Yeah, and I'll work backwards, just I think season as a whole, and then focus on the regional tournament. But I mean, you got to, I think, give them a tip of the cap for how Kevin O'Sullivan and the staff handled the season with just the amount of injuries they had from the jump. You know, with Kyle, was it Kyle Jones or
Kyle Jones. Yeah.
Kyle Jones, the transfer.
Hey, Curlin also went down.
Yeah, I mean,
Frankie Menendez, lefty specialist, went down.
Yeah. You lose such a big piece in Kyle Jones in the outfield that was a huge impact transfer. The guy that was going to be a big piece of the roster, big piece of the lineup so early in the season, and to still go 39-22 overall, 15-15 SEC. I've had SEC coaches personally to my face tell me 15 wins in this conference is a good season, is a really good, like, that is not easy to do. And I know, you know, it's easy to say, oh, well, you know, Texas had 22, Arkansas had 20, LSU 19, Vanderbilt 19, Georgia 18, Auburn 17, you know, like, yeah, those are exceptional seasons, extremely exceptional seasons, especially when you put 20 wins up in the conference. I mean, unbelievable. I mean, I think 15 is like I said, if you can go 15 wins in the SEC, that's a good season, and you will be in the postseason. We've seen it. We saw a 13-17 Kentucky make the postseason and have a really good shot through their regional. They played really well. We'll get into, but to kind of navigate the injuries and just the lack of depth that they've had throughout the season, you miss such key players like you mentioned, like Colby Shelton, and the impact that he has in the lineup and just the threat and the defensive, you know, abilities he has. You lose Luke Heyman, a veteran presence down up right before the postseason. Like what that means, and just so getting, I don't want to say derailed, but just so depleted by options off the bench too. You're playing with 9 guys, you know, 9 position players. Like for them to battle through this regional, I think the way they did, yes, it didn't end up the way they wanted to. And I think more so getting, I guess, blown out by East Carolina in 2 games, and, you know, both their losses being to them was disappointing. But there's so much to look forward to for this team for next season, especially guys like Aiden King, what he was able to do in a postseason game as a freshman. 8 innings, 4 hits, 1 earned, 7 Ks, 2 walks in a postseason game as a freshman. He probably is going to be the Friday night guy next year, and he should. I mean, to see his growth and development, what they've been able to do with him in year one, just take what you can from this. And I'm not saying it's, you know, oh, Florida should be in Omaha. They've been in Omaha more times than they haven't under Kevin O'Sullivan. That doesn't mean it's going to happen all the time. And I think to expect that this season is kind of just so, I don't want to say selfish, but just like unknowing of ball. Because the years that they've been to Omaha, they haven't dealt with this many injuries and issues, you know, on off the field as they've had. You know, it's just hard to kind of compare. But like, I agree with you. If they, you know, had to run it back, I think this is one of the best draws they could have gotten of any regional by far. I mean, if they go in FSU regional, I'm still picking FSU. Like, this was a chance for them to go do that. And they, you know, win a regional in which they're kind of have a target on their back, but, you know, kind of being an underdog. This was a regional to do so in a sleeper of a 3 in East Carolina that we've seen be on a national stage before, and, you know, been a host, you know, been a really good 2 seed as well. And Cliff Godwin knows how to really coach a baseball team and recruit and develop guys. I mean, it was just tough, and just kind of, I think the straw that broke the camel's back, Chris, which is how banged up and just up and down the season's been. And it's just tough, but you got to give, you know, East Carolina props for putting it to Florida twice, not once, but twice. Like once you can say, all right, maybe just they got to him that day, right? But twice. And then, you know, Coastal to kind of almost walk through the regional, it feels like, except for the championship game. They win 1-0 in a gritty game there. But I think that's kind of my way to sum up the Conway Regional, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, listen, for Florida, like I said, I just think when you come out of the gate and your ace gets shelled, it's going to be tough.
It's a bad precedent.
It's going to be tough. It's just, and that goes for anybody, obviously, but that was a bad tone setter. And, you know, I think what you said, Harrison, again, it stands. I'm sure Coastal Carolina Twitter or East Carolina Twitter, somebody out there probably clipped this and reposted it and whatever, and they've had a lot of fun with us, and Freezing Cold Takes reposted us, and that's all great. But that fact still does remain. Florida just didn't take advantage of the draw they got. And I think it was a Gators team, Harrison, at some point. I don't know. I don't know if I can speak for you on this, but I feel like at some point, I don't know that I was expecting it, but I was like, I'm not going to be surprised if team just kind of runs out of gas. Like
absolutely.
They fought through so much adversity to get here, and it didn't surprise me to see like they just finally, the tank was emptied, and it just, you know, it's disappointing, but Just kind of is what it is.
Chris, Florida ran out of gas on the road, figuratively and literally. I mean, I think it wouldn't have surprised me if they won this regional or lost this regional. I just thought, the kind of ceiling this team has, let's have some fun. Let's pick an upset. And I thought it was a good spot to pick an upset. Same with Alabama playing Southern Miss. I thought that would have been a good spot to pick an upset. So I was like, why not? Let's have some fun with it.
Yeah,
it's hard to pick these regionals, Chris. People don't understand how hard it is.
If they don't understand after this weekend, then I don't know when they'll understand, because I don't know many folks out there that did great. But either way, Coastal Carolina comes out of the Conway Regional. They will advance to the Supers as Florida's 2025 season comes to an end. Harrison, the team they will face, and finally, my friend, we are, 45 minutes into this show. We're finally talking about an SEC team winning. I'm getting depressed to this point talking about these regionals, because the Auburn Tigers, finally we can talk about an SEC team advancing. They really just take care of business, swept through this thing. Auburn disposing of Central Connecticut State in game 1, 9-5. They beat Stetson, who I thought had a really good showing, 8-5. And then they take care of NC State in the final game, 11-1, a blowout. I thought Stetson, Harrison, their first game, 11-2. They beat NC State. That was kind of one of the loud showings of day one, of Friday, if you will. But it did end up being Auburn-NC State. Auburn advances. SEC gets one on the ACC. They didn't get many, admittedly, over the weekend. But the Auburn Tigers, really solid at home at Plains Park. And when we talked about Harrison, let's also say this too. We felt like it was a pretty reasonable and even favorable draw for Auburn. They take advantage of it. They just keep on keeping on. And it's the Auburn Tigers advance to the Supers, and they will host that Super against Coastal. Your thoughts on what you saw from War Eagle over the weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a favorable draw for Auburn, especially being, the 4 seed overall. I think NC State was kind of an inconsistent 2 seed. Stetson gets in, I think, via the share of the ASUN tournament title because of a 7-hour lightning delay that just ended up being named co-champions. But they were scrappy too. Don't discount them and give them, gotta give them credit for the way they played against NC State, the way I think they played against Auburn, and then the way they played against NC State again in a 17-12 elimination game, just scratching and clawing, which was really good for Auburn. I think having used a lot of pitching too, either team. But I think you got to give props more so to Auburn's bats for handling business more so than the pitching staff. I mean, outside of Carson Myers, who shoved, 6 innings, 6 hits, 1 earned, 9 Ks, 2 walks. The bullpen after him, hit or miss a little bit. But just I think the offense taking care of business, when your ace and Samuel Dutton, gives up 5 earned in 6 2/3, and behind him, Ryan Heltzer comes in and slams the door shut, scattering 5 hits. But the offense, doing what they do best and just coming up, and it feels like Auburn just coming up in clutch moments throughout the season and having, I'm going to say this again because it's the postseason, having 3 freshmen in premier roles in a lineup. It's just how important that is for, the offense production throughout the lineup to produce. You got Chris, remember, their second baseman, he's a starting second baseman, freshman, leadoff spot, goes 4 for 6, 2 runs, 4 RBIs in that championship, that regional final game in which they won 11-1, 15 hits. It's going, like I said, it's gonna be hard to keep up with anyone, and it's gonna be hard to lose a game when you score double-digit runs. Yes, it's regionals, anything can happen the further you get it because of the pitching depletion, but you give yourself such a great chance, and Auburn really did so on the hitting side, because the pitching wasn't as dominant as I thought it could have been and should have been, considering the draws they had. You give up 5 to Central Connecticut State. I was really surprised about that. The Stetson game, fine, but the NC State game, just maybe NC State running out of gas more, but Auburn just, hey, we're not taking anything for granted. We're going to go out in here and take care of business. And that's what they did in Auburn. And, they were getting rewarded with hosting a super regional. First time in quite a while.
Yeah, you mentioned those young guys, Harrison, and I don't even know if you say they're freshmen anymore at this point, that much they've played and the experience they've gotten, but certainly what they're doing so early in their careers down there on the Plains.
Bob Torella had a big game too as well. 3 RBIs, 2 for 3. How important it is for them to step up in those roles. I think it's a good point of they feel like sophomores at this point.
Yeah, I think what I'm noticing too, Harrison, now that we're talking about, and maybe this is kind of obvious, but it's just the teams, especially from the SEC, that fared well are teams that are complementary from the standpoint of offensively and defensively on the mound and in the box. Like, they do both pretty well. Some of the teams we saw get eliminated, it was like one side of the ball had to carry the other, and I just don't know that in the postseason you can make a living doing that. Like, if you're not complimentary, if you don't have a second punch, like if you don't have a hook to go with that jab, it's going to be really tough to like skate your way through postseason play. And that's the credit to Auburn. Again, people didn't want to give them their roses throughout this season, and I get it. Like, it took so much longer, I feel like, for people to come around on Auburn and respect Auburn, but they're a really complimentary club. They're a complete team. Like, if they have a bad night on the bump, their hitting can pick them up. Vice versa, the pitching can pick them up, right? So, and I don't think you could say that about every single team that was in the field. I think it's why we saw some of these teams exit in the regional round. So, again, really impressive for Auburn. I think they're a real threat, obviously, to continue, make a run. We'll talk about the Supers, obviously, on Thursday. But we talked about it weeks ago, Harrison. This is a real Omaha contending, national championship contending type of ball club. We said that weeks ago and wasn't surprised at all the way they ran through their own regional.
Hey, Chris, Auburn, the first time in program history hosting a super regional.
Program history. Wow. I mean, that's wild. That's actually like hard to believe because they've been, dude, Plains and Park.
They went on the road when was it 2021? I think when they went to Omaha.
Plainsman Park's going to be jumping this weekend. No question. That's going to be a lot of fun. All right. So, again, it'll be Auburn, Coastal Carolina in that super. Harrison, let's keep it moving. And this one's depressing. The Austin Regional. The Texas Longhorns fall to UTSA. UTSA goes into Austin, walk in your trap and take over your trap. They win the regional. Texas wins their first game, beats Houston Christian 7-1. They then lose to UTSA in the winner's game 9-7. Texas bounces back. They beat Kansas State before falling to UTSA in the elimination game, or the regional final, if you will, 7-4. And Harrison, I thought the thing that was really telling, and I'll say this too, I picked UTSA to win the regional. I'm not thrilled that it happened. I wish it didn't happen. I'm not happy about it at all, actually. I wanted, admittedly, selfishly, to see Texas and Omaha. I know you did as well. We had selfish reasons and non-selfish reasons. We wanted to see Texas and Omaha. But what I thought was really telling, because we've been talking about all these massive upsets, what's really telling is when you listen to Jim Schlossnagle, and you and I have both had some of the same conversations, some of the staff there, they were very open and honest about how nervous they were and about how good they thought UTSA was. And sure enough, I mean, it played out that way. I mean, Schlossnagle straight up said, like, this isn't an upset. Like, that's just a really good team. Like, and you watch the games, Harrison, like, UTSA just beat them. I don't think you can look at this and say, like, it was a fluke or, you know, Texas just booted the ball around and walked a bunch of guys. I mean, did they play their best baseball? Not necessarily, but UTSA is just a really, really good club. So it's a really disappointing end of the season of Texas. It's an interesting season in Austin, Harrison, where, yes, you win the regular season title, but it's such a bitter end. And again, it's year one of the Schlossnagle era. So the expectations and what was deemed a success for Schloss's first year, it's hard. It's kind of almost hard to discuss it from the standpoint of the goalposts moved drastically during the season because of how good you were. Number one team in the country, SEC regular season champions. For it to end in Austin as the number two overall national seed in your own regional, really, really disappointing. Harrison, your thoughts on what we saw from Texas and from the Austin Regional as a whole?
Yeah, I think it was disappointing as a whole, losing the regional on your home field to an in-state smaller school in UTSA. But you got to give kudos to UTSA. The Roadrunners, I mean, running through the regional, pun intended. I mean, they were 44-13, Chris, entering the postseason. 25-6 in their conference in the AAC. 25 RPI. So like they play a really strong RPI season, right? And you look at the metrics of the tournament. I mean, they're the third best batting average, fourth best on-base percentage, 33rd slugging, 11th best strikeout percentage. That means they don't strike out a lot. 11th or 14th best weighted on-base average. The bullpen is really, really solid. They have a lot of strengths there, and not a slouch in the starting pitching rotation. We saw them during the season, Chris. They beat both Texas and Texas A&M on the road. I mean, just like you said, was Coach Slaugh's, like, this is not a bad team at all. Like, they are a really good 2 seed. I think there's more of a sleeper of a 2 seed because they weren't, a household name, a name brand, an SEC or an ACC school, right? Or, a Big 12 school. But like the way that they went out there and played, you got to give them props for how they, I think, strategized the weekend with their pitching staff and everything, but just the way that the hitters stepped up. I mean, you go up there and you take care of business, it felt like, and just made the plays and made the at-bats and hits when they mattered most and in such tight situations. I mean, they didn't look or feel tense at all, Chris, in these tight ball games against Texas. At Texas, day or night, didn't really matter, right? And I think for Texas, you saw the flashes of the offense against Kansas State. 16 hits, 15 runs. You put up a 6 spot in the first, but like just the flashes of, hey, this is what the offense could show us they can do. This isn't what they do consistently, but this is what they can do, right? And the upside of it, just like the reach of the ceiling. But we've seen kind of the floor of Texas, and we talk a lot about ceilings and floors. I think the floor of Texas's offense is a lot lower than what the box score and what the record looks like. And it's because they've gotten so many of their hits, not a ton of them, but so many, like as a volume, but like a majority of their hits, feel like, Chris, have been in such clutch and big moments late in games and tight ball games because the pitching staff has really, taken care of business and handled it and made everything a close game. But then when you have, kind of, it feels like almost a bullpen game, with Hudson Hamilton, Ethan Walker, then you have your guys of Max Grubbs, Valantis, and Thomas Burns go, and just kind of whoever, like you're seeing the line, everyone, is as available as you can be. And just for them to not be able to have, the stopping power on the mound, because and that's going to happen. You can't just always, like you said, it feels like the teams that, relied too heavily on one side of the ball, whether it was pitching with Vanderbilt, pitching with Texas, or hitting, with others, it's got to come back to bite you at some point. And this isn't a, pitching travels or hitting travels thing, because both these teams, Texas and Vanderbilt, are playing at home. But just when the pitching staff gives up, has a bad day, that one day they have it, or 2 days, and the offense can't pick it up behind them, you're putting yourself in a tough position, in a hard position to come back and win a game, especially a team that UTSA, I think, Chris, came in this regional playing with house money. Talk about house money. I think they came in regional playing with house money because they're playing the number 2 team, Texas. Okay, they already beat them once this season. That was good enough, right? Like, okay, if they lose, to Texas in the regional final, okay, they already beat them once earlier, right? They're the little brother, the little dog, and I think they kind of played the chip on their shoulder, and they went out there and proved that they can hang with the big boys. And a lot of those guys that probably would have loved to play at Texas, loved to have been recruited by Texas, go out there and just made the plays and the hits when it mattered most, and kind of gave Texas a little bit of taste of their own medicine. What they've done a lot this season, just stepping up when they needed to and closing the door when it needed to. So that was kind of the synopsis of the regional. But for Texas season as a whole, I think it was I'm not gonna say an overwhelming success. I think it was definitely a success. I don't think there's a question about that. Yes, you're a Texas and you lose a regional on your home field to an in-state smaller school, but you moved from the Big 12 to the SEC in year one with a new head coach, new entire coaching staff, half a new roster, it feels like. And you go out there and run through the gauntlet of the SEC and win the SEC by regular season by 2 or 3 games. I mean, you can't look at that season and say it's a disappointment. You can say the postseason result didn't end how we wanted to. That was disappointing, but the season as a whole is not a disappointment. So that's where I stand on it.
Yeah, I think the season wasn't a disappointment, but you are correct. The way it finished was very, very disappointing.
And it leaves a bad taste in Texas fans' mouths.
There's a lot of mixed emotions because, like, on one hand, and you're right, year one of Jim Schlossnagle, we came in with very conservative expectations. I thought they finished middle of the pack. I think even in the preseason, I probably expected them to be sort of like what Oklahoma was, like go on the road for a regional, probably put up a good fight, get eliminated. And that would have been an okay season. It's year one, whatever. Like I said, the goalposts moved because you got to number 1 in the country. And Harrison, like, can we just call it for what it is when you have the University of Texas at Omaha on your cleats? And that's just so clearly, it's so, and it should be the expectation, but it just is so clearly the expectation of that place. When you put yourself in a position to make a run to Omaha like you did, and you don't even get out of your own regional, there's some mixed emotion there. There is. I don't think anybody obviously should be saying like it was an awful first year, but I was going to ask you, how would you grade year one of Schlossnagle? Because I know they won the SEC regular season title, but I probably give it like a B. Because I mean, just, you know,
I give it a B plus.
And that's fair. I mean, I don't think it's in A territory. I just don't think you can give it that.
If they win this regional and then lose the Super,
that's fine. That's fine. You could give it an A minus for sure.
That's kind of what I expected to happen going into the postseason. I think even with going into the SEC tournament, you know, just with like.
I mean, listen, Joe Cook, who covers Texas or Inside Texas, literally told me before the season, I vividly remember, I asked him, what's the expectation? He said, you got to make a Super. That was, it seemed like that was Texas fans' expectation. So, you know, anyway.
Their expectation for Texas as a, you know, program this year with the talent and, you know, the coaching staff, you know, level of pedigree and how great of coaches they are, and just what Max Wiener's done with plenty of pitchers and pitching staffs, and Nolan Cain and, you know, Jim Schlossnagle, how good of a head coach he is, whether you like him or not, as good of a head coach as he is, because he is. And just kind of the expectation when you have Texas across your chest and what that means for the program as a history, I think that is, you know, an expectation. That's a good expectation to have. It's not that's our baseline standard, but that's our expectation. Super regional.
Yeah.
I don't think Omaha can be an expectation for any program.
Yeah. I think you and I agree that things drastically changed for Texas when Jared Spencer went down for the year. I
think the season changed right after the A&M series.
I mean, yeah, the record would indicate that. They finished the season 6-9 after that. So, yeah, it's weird. And again, I did pick the upset. I didn't. You know, I do think going back, Harrison, like I think they peaked too early. And I know you can't control that, so that's really frustrating to just say. But we talked about it. It was like, you know, at some point it's going to come around, and you're going to cool. Not even if you don't go cold, you're going to cool off a little bit. You give me Texas. You give me Texas the way they were playing in early April. They do get through this regional, but you know, it just.
Chris, for me, it was more so the offensive clutch factor cooled off in the regional.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So you know, it's unfortunate because I think this team obviously had all the makings of Omaha. I think you and I would have damn near put them in pin to make it to Omaha at the midway point of the season, and for it to end obviously there at Dish Falk, really disappointing. But I do feel confident in saying this: Texas will be back. I think they are going to win a national championship under Jim Schlossnagle. It'll take some time. They got to add some other pieces, but a really good core foundation to build around. After this year, some of those young guys that they had obviously on that team. So anyways, though, UTSA, credit to them, tip the cap. They went in there, kicked ass, took names. They advanced to the Super. And Haberson, they will take on the winner of the Los Angeles Regional. The UCLA Bruins do work out there on the West Coast. They beat Fresno State 19-4, beat Arizona State 11-5, and then down UC Irvine 8-5. They sweep through this one. I know UC Irvine was an upset pick for you here, but UCLA taking care of their business. And they will host the Super out there in Los Angeles. Your thoughts on what UCLA did over the weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it's honestly impressive with the offensive standpoint and just the production that they had in the box. 19 runs in game 1, 11 runs in game 2, 8 runs in game 3. Just taking care of business and just the offense carrying the way, because the pitching staff I wasn't as impressed with, to be honest. I mean, just from a standpoint of, you know, game 3, it was an entire bullpen game. Game 2, you know, your starter goes, 3 innings, I think, or unless they started Ian May. But I mean, Jack Anchor looked, you know, okay, 5 innings, 10 hits, 6 earned, but like the offense, just production they got from, you know, guys all over the lineup. It felt like Roman Martin, you know, Peyton Brennan, you know, Cashel Duggar. I mean, just, I was impressed with that they slugged it the way they did. I thought, you know, another upset pick for me, just kind of, you never know what's going to happen. I thought UC Irvine was a really good team that played well this season and, you know, could compete and keep up with UCLA. And, you know, they did in some regards, even after losing their first game to Arizona State and fighting back, but losing the regional final and not even forcing a game 7. But I mean, UCLA offense carrying the way and proving it while they're in a super regional and now hosting one.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one. UCLA, UTSA with a spot in Omaha on the line out there in Los Angeles. Harrison, let's keep it moving and go to maybe the most fun region of the weekend, the Oxford Regional. Buddy, this regional, and it's fitting, by the way, because of where it was played and some of the teams involved. This regional was drunk from the get-go. I mean, this one was all over the place because Ole Miss goes out their first game, boom, they lose to 4-seed Murray State. Murray State, obviously, one of the hottest picks when it came to a 4-seed. I think it's safe to say, certainly now, they were the best 4-seed in the tournament.
And I said that going in.
A really good club. I'll even start with this first game, Harrison. And Ole Miss fans, I think a lot agree with me. Some very, very adamantly disagreed. One of the big storylines last week, Harrison, going in was, do you pitch off? Do you throw your ace? I think that game 1 goes to show why you don't pitch off and don't save your ace when you've got a really pesky 4-seed. And like I say pesky, they're just really good. And you throw Riley Maddox, and all due respect to him, and he had been good at times, but like you were obviously trying to save Hunter Elliott for a potential Georgia Tech showdown, which you got, by the way, but it didn't come the way we thought it would. It backfires on you, flat out. Murray State beat you 9-6, a game in which they jumped out way ahead of you. You try to come back, but Riley Maddox was just simply not very good in the game, and you lose. Ole Miss then beats Western Kentucky 8-6. They got to come out of the elimination bracket. They didn't get Georgia Tech, and they beat Georgia Tech and in Danny Hall's season. And Harrison, I'll let you talk on that in a second. 11-9. I know that one obviously cut deep for you, but Ole Miss keeps it going. They get Murray State. They beat them 19-8. The offense wakes up. They force that Monday night winner take all. And Harrison, my goodness, they're down 12-3 in that game early. They storm all the way back to get it to 12-11, only for Murray State to close the door and win the Oxford Regional. My friend, what do you make of a wacky weekend down there in the SIP?
Yeah, the Oxford Regional was a cinema of stress and offensive explosion.
For every team.
Every team.
Everybody was sweating, maybe except Western Kentucky, who went 2-2. But everybody else was sweating.
I said 3 things going to this regional. Actually, 4. This is the hardest and deepest regional in the country. Murray State's the best 4-seed in the country. I love this spot for Georgia Tech and how they match up with Ole Miss. And it's the most it's going to be the most exciting regional. And all 4 of those delivered. And I think it delivered in a way that none of us expected to happen. I think, let alone Murray State winning it all. I think that just the entire regional was so much fun to watch. If you like college baseball, this was the regional to watch, to get in and love college baseball from a stress and just unbelievably fun and same environment standpoint too. But I don't have a problem with pitching off, even against a 4-seed. I think you kind of have to. You play to win the regional, Chris, not the game. Yes, you have to win the first game to win the regional. Usually 93% or 85% of the teams that win a regional win game 1 in the 400 sample size. But I think you needed to, honestly. But just the way that, like I said, the offense has just carried everything. And I said that offense is what's going to carry teams throughout the postseason because, like I said, you can have a guy with a 9 ERA step up. We saw it with Griffin Page versus Vanderbilt and throw 8 one-hit innings, 1-run innings. I mean,
yeah,
it was just about
42 runs for Murray State in 4 games. I mean, they were swinging it like crazy.
The Missouri Valley Conference 3 years in a row proving that they can hang and compete with the big boys deep in the postseason. You got Oral Roberts in 2023, Evansville in 2024 going to a super. Oral Roberts went to the College World Series in 23. Evansville is a game away from beating the eventual national champions, Tennessee, in a super regional and going to the College World Series. Now Murray State runs through this regional, races their way through this regional, scoring runs, running around the bags, Chris. Just racing around the bags because everyone just felt like was scoring. I mean, unbelievable. You got a 9-6 game, a 13-11 game, a 19-8 game, and then a 12-11 game. Just adrenaline through the roof. Can anyone stop the bleeding is what this regional came down to. And Murray State proved they were able to just barely after nearly blowing the game entirely, being up so big in game 7. But you got to give them credit for just the way they played. I think how Dan Skirka managed the pitching staff and just, the offensive production they got. on the big stage versus big arms in the SEC and the ACC. Honestly, I think that's the most important thing. Is just the biggest takeaway for me is just, yeah, because the pitching struggling to give a ton of runs, but like how the offense hanged with these power arms from these teams, from Ole Miss and Georgia Tech. I was really impressed with two teams that have a lot of high leverage arms that have played and pitched in a lot of big games and big moments and statistically very successful seasons, honestly. And
didn't you say it was Murray State had 0 guys that averaged 92 plus?
Murray State had 0 guys that averaged 92 miles an hour or faster on their fastball. I think
Georgia Tech had like 8 or 9 and Ole Miss had like 13.
It was like 13, I think 10 and then 0. So, I mean, it's just the most wild college baseball.
Here's what I'll say is this, Harrison. We're talking about it. Like, I'm giving all the credit in the world to Murray State, but my God, what a missed opportunity for Georgia Tech and Ole Miss. Especially you think Ole Miss, you'd have been hosting the Super, because we're going to talk about in a second. The team you were squared up against, they lose. It's like,
hey, Georgia Tech would have hosted the Super too.
Georgia Tech would have hosted the Super. Like,
yeah.
I mean, my goodness, you give credit, but you just look back and you're like, man, we really let it. Especially in Ole Miss, who, man, I would have banked on they were going to win that Monday night game. So credit to Murray State for no fear, no intimidation, didn't miss a beat. They jump all over them. Boy, that one's going to sting for Hottie Toddy for quite a while, man. That's going to sting. You can give all the credit, tip the cap. My goodness, that's going to sting. I think
it stings a lot for Georgia Tech too. Just the way that
Danny Hall's
season comes to an end after the game versus Murray State and just losing that one in a thriller and a shootout, 11-13, and then the way that they lost to Ole Miss, being up big. Or they were down to Murray State, I think 10-3, come back and end up losing that 13-11. But then the Murray State game is just back and forth, or Ole Miss back and forth, like gut-wrenching. Just oh my God! I mean, it felt like a workout the entire time I watched this regional. My heart was just like I was running in zone 2. I mean, it was crazy. But I think it's just the players hate that for him, and obviously, imagine Danny Hall in Omaha in his final retirement season, how much of a beautiful storyline that would have been, let alone hosting a Super. That would have been just an unbelievable opportunity and way to, cap his postseason if that was where it ended. But man, it was just there for the taking, and just Georgia Tech just didn't step up. I thought Georgia Tech was in the best position to take this, honestly. Winning their first game, not using a ton of pitching, and just the offense production they had and the lineup behind them throughout 1 through 9 that can score. Guys, freshmen, sophomores, it didn't matter who they were. It's just everyone in the lineup can produce, and they proved that. Just the pitching staff really fell flat and fell short and lost Georgia Tech this regional and into Danny Hall's season a little shorter than I expected and hoped and wanted. I think the same with the players and the fan base, unfortunately. But I mean, one of the best coaches in college baseball history, top 10 all time in wins. I mean, the accolades I could go on about. He's already a Hall of Fame head coach from 2 years ago. I think they got nominated. So
yeah, legend of college baseball.
Legend Danny Hall.
Tip of the cap to Danny Hall. It's unfortunate the season has to end at the point at which it did.
But what a thrill to go out, I guess.
Yeah, but
I mean,
Ole Miss
is shut out, that's for sure.
Yeah, Ole Miss is also sitting here in the same position you are.
Tuesday
is a little bit different, but man, I mean, Murray State, what a story. A 4 seed. We felt like a 4 seed would win one regional, and sure enough, it was the one that I think a lot of folks out there were picking to advance and pull the big upset. Harrison, let's go to who the Oxford Regional is going to face off against. So it'll be Murray State taking on the winner of the Athens Regional. And it is not the Georgia Bulldogs. It is the Duke Blue Devils of the ACC that go into Athens, go into Foley Field, a place where Georgia had been so incredible all season long. And I don't know if shocking is too strong a word, but certainly one of the more surprising results for me and for you. We both picked Georgia to come out of this one. I mean, Georgia got off to a hot start. They beat Binghamton 20-4. And Harrison, I will say this. I didn't call this, nor did you, but I did mention to you, and we both knew, like, Duke had gone into Athens and won this regional before in years past. They had gone into Athens and won an Athens regional before. So Chris Pollard's team shows up with a lot of confidence, and they play really well, right? Georgia loses to Duke in the winner's bracket game because Duke beat Oklahoma State. They lose to Duke 6-3. And then Harrison for Georgia. You talk about a gut-wrenching way to end your season. I mean, up in a ball game late. You got a chance to win it, and the bullpen just completely vomits all over themselves, and Oklahoma State hits the walk-off homer. I mean, 11-9. Harrison, I can't think of many worse ways for your season to end. Losing your own regional is one thing. Getting walked off on your home field is another. So
Chris, this is the worst way to lose a regional, getting walked off at your home ballpark in front of your entire fan base that showed up. That still didn't sell out the stadium, surprisingly. But the way
and you were, by the way, I should have mentioned, you were in Athens over the weekend. So you can give, and by the way, I just finished, Duke beats Oklahoma State 3-2. They win the regional. Your thoughts, again, you were there. You watched that game against Duke. Georgia, they tried to come back and win that one too, but fell up short. Thoughts on what you saw, atmosphere at Foley, overall experience, and I mean, just, dude, how surprised are you talking about this one and talking about Duke taking this Athens regional?
I think this is the worst way to end your season, is getting walked off in a regional at your home ballpark in front of your entire fan base that still didn't sell out the entire crowd. And then there was a really good pocket of Duke fans there that were loud and cheering and wearing their blue. But I think it was, in a way, different, worse than last year's losing a super regional in a game 7 against North Carolina State on your home ballpark, because that was just such a back and forth super regional series. This one was just like, Georgia fans felt so overwhelmingly confident going into it that they should run the floor with this, playing at home, and how well they do, especially after winning game 1, 20-4. Yes, it's Binghamton, but still. But I was concerned about this pick going in, because Duke can slug it, and they're playing at a hitter-friendly ballpark that's 314 down right field line and only 385 to center. Granted, it is like 350 to left field, surprisingly. But in Oklahoma State's a really good pitching staff. They're the best pitching staff in this regional. Duke could swing it with Georgia almost as well. But I thought it was a pretty deep regional outside of Binghamton, and worried me a little bit. I just had said going into the postseason, said a lot throughout the season. I got a lot of hate for Georgia. I said, Georgia's pitching staff is not good enough to go to Omaha. Like, Georgia's pitching staff is going to be determining where and how far their season is. And it determined it here. And that has been our worries for them the entire season, because you could say they lost 6-3 to Duke in, the 1-0 game. But still, you gave up 6 runs. I mean, you can outslug them there. I mean, because you scored 20 the game before, 9 in the game, the end of season. But it really came down to the pitching. It always was going to come down to the pitching. And, like I said, with the offense, if it's really one-sided, whether it's pitching or hitting, that one time they don't, do their thing and carry the load like they did in the 1-0 game against Duke, you fall short and have a really, really tough time fighting your way out of a hole to win a game. And that's what happened. And Oklahoma State just, God, I mean, gut-wrenching, gutty win. I mean, to do that, and just, I was really impressed with Oklahoma State's showing in this, honestly. Duke, I was, impressed, but more so impressed with Oklahoma State after losing game 1 and then fighting through that. And from the losers bracket, especially with the offense, I didn't think was going to produce nearly as much as they did. I was impressed from that standpoint. I thought this was a really exciting regional to watch, and loud atmosphere. I will give Georgia fans a really loud atmosphere, but I mean, they're loud in general. It's just kind of, the drunk, obnoxious Georgia fans that they call themselves. So a really fun atmosphere, though. I will give them that. And, the hospitality was great in Athens. We had a really good time there covering the game and covering Georgia. But I think an exciting regional, but just a disappointing end to a season that Georgia fans expected to minimum get back to a super regional and then try to get over that hump and get back to Omaha. So disappointing from that standpoint. I think a successful season overall, though, when you look at it, just how good they were as a team throughout the entire season, but just a bitter, tough, terrible tasting way to end the season for Georgia.
I don't know if I can look at Georgia's season and say it was like a success. I don't know, man. I'm
saying full body work, yes, but the ending is just, I mean,
yeah.
We talked about, Chris, entering the season, how much pieces they lost with Charlie Condon.
I know. 2008 is just getting further and further away, man. It's been a long time.
I hope it gets further.
Right. It's been a long time since the Dogs. We made the point.
We made the point that they fell short of expectations.
Georgia was running from their pitching all season long, and it finally it caught up. And again, when the baseball becomes its most important and its highest level, you're not going to be able to run away from your deficiencies forever. This is when it's going to show itself. So like we've been talking about, if you've got a major deficiency one side or the other, like if you're trying to outrun your bad hitting and keep, out dueling people on the mound, that's probably going to catch up to you. Whether it catches up to you in the regionals or the supers, probably before Omaha, it's going to get you. Same thing with Georgia. Like you kept running away from pitching deficiencies. And I'm really like, this is a big offseason, I think, for Wes Johnson. Just I'm curious, how much can they upgrade the pitching staff? Because like he's a pitching guy. Like I don't think a third year. I just don't know how well it's going to sit with people. Like if we get to a third year and it's like, bro, the pitching's still not good. I mean, you're a pitching guy. Like, well, Chris, where's the pitching?
One of those underrated things, and I think is a big reason why they lost this regional. Georgia cannot hit lefties to save their life. I've had a lot of people that cover Georgia tell me this. I've had people close to the team, tell me this. I've witnessed it with my own eyes throughout the season and in person in a regional in which Duke literally attacked that where they went all lefties the entire game. And it was just so obvious that Georgia, and they've done everything they could to try to hit lefties this entire season. Everything. Yeah. I promise you they've done everything. And yeah, they got on Oklahoma State's ace who pitched in that, elimination game after coming out of the hospital and being on IVs. That's why he was available in that game. And he wasn't 100%. I owe a friend I lost a bet with that. But, I mean, they got to him, but they just couldn't get more, enough runs after that and stop the bleeding with the bullpen. And the bullpen is just, like we said, has not been able to has carried the load, actually, for the majority of the season on the backs of them carrying the starting pitching staff, but just falling short here. And the offense just barely not having enough to overcome that. But I think that's such an under the radar kind of thing is that Georgia's just struggled all year with lefties and especially in the postseason.
And interestingly enough, Harrison, again, an Athens Regional that certainly we discussed, but I didn't feel like was getting a lot of the same hype and publicity. Like it felt like it was flying under the radar, and it turns out to be one of the most dramatic regionals that we saw of the weekend. And now you get Duke and Murray State.
Yeah, and kudos to Duke. I got to give them love. But, I was really impressed with how they played, obviously, like I said, with going through this regional and just playing and slugging it, but also playing well in tight games. I think we need to give them props for that. And getting to host a super regional, Duke, no one saw that coming.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Chris Pollard, there's a reason why his name is always on these short lists of when hot boards come out and coaching searches. I mean, you look at what he's done with that Duke program, it's really impressive. And now they get to host a super regional Murray State.
North Carolina area, too.
Yeah, for sure. Harrison, let's keep it moving. The Baton Rouge Regional, the LSU Tigers wrap it up on Monday night. It took a little bit longer than many of us expected, but the result that we all expected when we talked about this regional and the draw they got, LSU advances to the Supers. Harrison, they beat Little Rock 7-0 in game one. They beat DBU, who, some folks thought they were even some bold enough to pick the upset. LSU beats them 12-0. So you're thinking to yourself, my goodness, they're just going to sweep through, easy weekend. Didn't quite work out that way. Little Rock beats LSU on Sunday 10-4. Then, of course, Harrison, Monday night, brother, it's 5-1 Little Rock. And I remember we're sitting there like, do what? Kason Evans etches his name in LSU baseball lore, basically becomes a legend overnight. Ethan Fry heats up, huge night for him. Bear Jones really puts the final nail in the coffin with a big home run. He finally breaks through and emerges his first extra base hit since May 17th, which is really hard. Yeah, against South Carolina, really hard to believe, but he finally breaks through. Luis Hernandez hits 2 bombs. They win that game 10-6. And the bottom line is this: LSU is headed to the Super Regionals. Harrison, your thoughts on this one? And I'll start by saying we saw the reason, or one of the reasons, why I think you and I are both so high on this LSU team. When you got a 1-2 punch like Cade Anderson and Anthony Ianson, they go Ianson in game one. But when you've got a two-headed monster like that, it's going to be hard for anybody to beat them at any point. So thoughts on LSU, thoughts on the Baton Rouge Regional as a whole?
I think it was still a little disappointing for LSU, even though they won the regional, because of just going toe-to-toe with and getting knocked around by a 4 seed, and a 4 seed that snuck in the tournament at 23-32 record, 13-16 Ohio Valley Conference record, a 243rd RPI answering the schedule. They won their conference tournament on a heater of all heaters to get into the tournament. and they take LSU to a game 7, LSU fans are still bitter and disappointed in that, and rightfully so. I don't think they had any. I mean, shout out to Arkansas Little Rock, but like they had no business hanging with this LSU team.
Here's what can I say this real quick, Harrison? Here's what I think we learned. Jay Johnson knows more baseball than you and I. That's not a hot take, but here's what I think we learned, and I hope that Jay learned as well. My friend, the next time you're in a game 3 situation, whether it's the Super this weekend or it's the 3rd game of the College World Series, you're obviously going to go Anderson and Ianson and Anderson your first 2. It needs to be Case and Evans as your number 3 guy. Because, I mean, that's why it went sideways. You start Newt in that game 3. You walk 11 guys. It's a disaster on the mound. It's a bad tone set from the jump. And your offense doesn't bail you out, right? I mean, they got to pick you up.
I think
it was a bad tone, but it was a bad tone set from the jump on the mound. And then on Monday, inexplicably, you start Zach Cowan, and it goes sideways again, and then you finally go to Case and Evans, and he shoves. It didn't cost you in the regional, but my friend, if you get in a situation again where Case and Evans is your 3rd best arm, it's not even remotely close. So I got to be honest, I thought that was a little bit. I know, but as much as he's pitched at this point, like he feels like he's a seasoned veteran, but like. I thought that was Jay a little bit overthinking it. I got to be honest with you. That's not me coming at Jay or anything. Like, maybe overthought it a little bit. He's human. It happens. You got away with it. I think that's the biggest thing if you're LSU. You breathe a sigh of relief, but I think that's the lesson you take away from the weekend. We get in this situation again, we got to turn to a dude, and Case and Evans is easily – I mean, he was brilliant, man. He really saved the day for them. Truly.
He saved the season for them, not the day, the season.
Yeah.
But I think obviously, like you have to go Case Evans game 3. And I think you go Anthony Ianson game 1 again because he's proved now he can come back on short rest and pitch in high leverage situations out the pen. I'm not sure if Cade Anderson can. No disrespect, I'm just not sure. I think Anthony Ianson just has the flexibility and just the build to do that mentally too. But like it was really just the walks I think killed them in that 1-0 game with Newt and Shores. Just Shores that's so talented and so good. I just think he's either on or off, unfortunately. And it's just when he's off, it just loses it for a little bit, unfortunately. And it really comes back to bite him and bit him there. But the offense didn't bail him out. We've seen the ups and downs of it, Chris. You've talked about it plenty of times. This offense can kind of go silent, and it really did. Barrett Jones has really been silent since May 17th, and puts the nail in the coffin. Then they come back in a game in which they got on the wrong side of it. But I said, if any team can come back, it's LSU at home. We talked about what inning. I said, it's probably going to be the 7th inning. Granted, I was wrong. It was, what inning was it they came back? I mean, like the 5th, 4th. But to come back the way they did and just battle, I think shows the kind of pedigree that they are, that like their backs against the wall and they trust themselves. And I trust Jay Johnson. They trust Jay Johnson. The fan base trusts Jay Johnson. And Case and Evans came in, stepped up, and edged his name into, like you said, LSU lore of just, yes, it was a regional. It wasn't in the College World Series, but just what that meant to, I think, LSU's season and saving it this season. And then, the offense, like kind of rallying behind that a little bit, honestly, I think. And, I think Jay Johnson learned a lot about, direction of how he wants to, go that game 3 and bullpen around that, and I think it was a tough lesson to learn, but they luckily learned it by still winning. So that was the biggest thing. And they're going to be hosting a super regional nonetheless in Alex Box.
Yeah, I mean, that's the bottom line. Again, you can breathe your sigh of relief. And I mean, I think the best news, listen, Monster Milam's heating up. Bear Jones, that was a huge swing of the bat for him. Maybe got kind of the monkey off his back. I would expect Bear to, Harrison in baseball, all it takes is one. It takes one good at bat, one good swing, one good pitch, and you're kind of back to being yourself, getting in a groove. Ethan Fry is seeing a beach ball right now. Luis Hernandez, same thing. So, like, the offensive pieces are there, like you mentioned, but the thing that sits in the back of your head, it scares you about LSU a little bit. The offense at times, the approach, I think at times, let's be honest, is not great.
Team like Little Rock, and shout out to Little Rock for going to toe-to-toe with LSU in a game 7. I mean, you'll love to see it, honestly, except if you're an LSU fan.
Yeah, I mean, it was much more competitive than I expected, I'll admit.
Yeah, because we talked about how you said Jay Johnson literally handpicked this regional. And then you have DBU go, 1-2, or what was it? Yeah, 1-2.
Yeah, because DBU won their first game against, it was Rhode Island that went 2-Q.
Yeah.
But DBU loses to Little Rock in the elimination game on Sunday, 8-6, and that's why LSU obviously gets Little Rock in the regional
Little Rock
final.
put up 52 runs, I think, in this series.
Yeah, they were swinging the sticks like crazy.
Shout out to them.
Yeah, and they actually won a lot of favor with the LSU community there. There was a lot of warm sentiment shared after the game. But bottom line is this: LSU wins the regional. They advance the Supers. The Supers will be held at Alex Box Stadium, and the team they will face, Harrison, comes out of the Clemson Regional, and it's not the Clemson Tigers. It's the West Virginia Mountaineers. West Virginia takes down Kentucky, who obviously we'll talk about being from the SEC, 4-3. Give Kentucky credit, Harrison. They bounce back, beat USC Upstate in the elimination bracket. Kentucky then knocks out Clemson. And this might have been one of the more surprising results, Harrison. Kentucky beat Clemson 16-4 to end their season at Doug Kingsmore Stadium. Meanwhile, West Virginia's in the winner's bracket. They were the ones that first beat up on Clemson 9-6. Then in the regional final, you get West Virginia, Kentucky. Really underrated game. This was one of the most fun games, I think, of the weekend. West Virginia outlasts them 13-12. Harrison, neither one of us picked it, but we talked about going in the weekend. Really dangerous West Virginia team, really tough ball club. We ranted and raved about them. Neither one of us picked them, but the Mountaineers, they will go into Alex Box after winning the Clemson Regional. Your thoughts on what transpired in the upstate of South Carolina?
Yeah, I was just disappointed by Clemson, honestly. I think it was definitely a disappointment for their season, not even making the regional final, but just how good and talented they were. And I think how bad they played overall. And I think Clemson fans hate to hear that, but would agree. But I think that the way that West Virginia came into the series in this weekend, I talked about it previewing this regional. Kentucky's a super scrappy team, is going to compete and going to, claw and fight their way and play their style game that's going to be tough to play with. You don't know, if they're going to come out on top or not, but a lot of close games. And I said West Virginia is the best road team in the country, and it's not even close. I mean, Chris, I told you that going in, their record on the road, 24-5 on the road now is what their record is. I mean, unbelievable how good they are. It's better than their home record of 17-7. Like, it's wild. And I think you got to give them a lot of props for coming here and taking care of business in a kind of handily fashion way up until that game 6, where, they just outslug and just had enough punches, enough, base hits and just guys stepping up. I mean, Gavin Kelly and Ben Lumsden just stepping up in the situation when it mattered and just having that one more extra base hit that they needed to beat Kentucky and not force a game 7, because that would have been probably another slugfest in game 7. But you got to give Kentucky props for fighting, I think, their way through the losers bracket to get back to a game 6 and just kind of showed the pesky fighting team that they are. And, not the team that they were last year making it to Omaha for the first time in program history, but just, I think it was a deeper regional than people expected and thought. And I think it was a successful season for Kentucky, ending how it did, getting that close and after sneaking in the tournament. But comparing it to last year, it's not successful, but I don't think it was too hard to do. But I think, I like the way that Kentucky played throughout the entire year and, into the season playing the way they did.
Yeah, I think based off preseason expectations, the Cats, Harrison, I think it was a successful year for them to get to where they did, as far as they did. Really disappointing. I agree with you for Clemson, but you got to give a lot of credit to West Virginia. That's just, that program, I remember from watching them last year when they played UNC in that super. I mean, you can obviously just tell the culture of that program is scrappy, like hard-nosed, blue-collar type of mentality. So West Virginia will travel to Baton Rouge, to Alex Box Stadium, to take on the LSU Tigers in what should be a really, really entertaining super regional. Harrison, let's go to Knoxville, Tennessee.
I'm going to grab my charger real quick while you preview this next one.
Okay, got you. Harrison's grabbing the charger. We are going long today. The Tennessee Volunteers, the Knoxville Regional. Tennessee comes out on top. They advance to, I believe it is their 5th straight super regional. Tennessee beats Miami of Ohio 9-2 in the first game. They then take down Cincinnati 10-6. They lose to Wake Forest on Sunday night in the winners game, or the regional final, I should say, 7-6, and then beat Wake Forest on Monday night in a game 7 winner take all, 11-5. And guys, I will say this: I picked Wake Forest to win the regional. I did. Went out on a limb. You saw over the weekend why that's probably a good idea to go out on a limb and pick some different upsets. I am ecstatic, obviously, that did not happen. That Tennessee wins it. Obviously, I want to see the Vols in the Super. I wanted to see the SEC prevail over the ACC. That's exactly what happened. Harrison, again, your thoughts. We talked about Tennessee a lot coming into this weekend. Would they play their best brand of baseball, their best version of baseball? We knew what the ceiling was, but the inconsistencies that had been there, that was the big thing I wanted to see. I know you sided with the Vols. Kudos to Tony Vitello and company. And by the way, I think the thing that stood out, Tennessee had the emotion had been a negative for them. It had gone against them, right, in multiple instances. I think the way they were able to channel it from Andrew Fisher to Liam Doyle to beyond, use it as a positive and use it as ammunition was something that really stood out to me.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going to go to. Just, I think the emotion that we've seen in previous Tennessee teams compared to the emotional kind of instability throughout the year, this was the best kind of emotional stability and just fuel that they had of all season, it felt like. And just like you said, from Andrew Fisher, hyping up the crowd, mashing a ball, and then hyping up the crowd running on the bases. And then Liam Doyle stepping off the mound, like, yeah, all right, okay, bet. Walks around the mound, gets back on, and then absolutely just gets even more dialed in than he already was, if that's even possible. But just channeling that in a way that was be able to use effectively, I think, was the biggest thing for me. And, shout out to Wake Forest. And that was a really good pick because you didn't know which kind of version of Tennessee you were going to get. But to force that, Game 7 and, how it kind of, went down to force that Game 7, 7-6 game in which, it feels just like every pitch matters. In so many of these games, you can say that, and just these Game 6s that force Game 7s and Game 7s themselves, but just felt like so many of these pitches matters. It's back and forth the entire game. And Wake Forest has that clutch, hit in the 9th inning that scores a run and, gives them the win. But just, there's still a lot of concerns, I think, for Tennessee. I still think there are. And it revolves around, Game 3. And you talk about how Game 3, like, who are they going to throw? Like, there's still concerns there. There's a lot of, unknowns, and no one's been able to step in that situation. But this is a situation when, the bats of Tennessee and the strength they have throughout the lineup stepped up in that situation and carried the load and carried the team and just kind of a bullpen game. Hey, who's hot right now and who can throw their best stuff and who's got it right now? And if not, it's going to be a short leash. And that's what it kind of feels like it's been. And Tony Vitello is managing that the best he can. And I think very well, good job of doing that so far this postseason. And, he's one of the best coaches in college baseball for a reason. It's not, playing like one of their best teams, especially in the postseason. But you look at it, just clutchness and playing at home, I think was such a huge factor. Just playing postseason ball at home. Yes, playing at home, they struggled throughout the postseason, or throughout the regular season playing at home. And I think, what was it? Their last home series win was it South Carolina? Was that on the road?
No, it was Florida or two.
Florida.
Their last home series win was, opening weekend of SEC play.
Yeah. And I think just postseason ball at Lindsey Nelson Stadium just hit different. And just
and listen, Andrew Fisher called for him to come out. He said, "We need
Andrew Fisher." He said, "If you think you're loud and coming out, loud enough and coming out of the ballpark, you're not. Bring your uncle. You need to get 3 times." They were vocal about it, and I have no problem with that at all. Especially when you play the way he does and get on base every single game of the season. In 3 games of last season, what is it? It's a 60-game on base streak at this point. It feels like. You can do that, and I think they really needed that, and it meant that much to the players in the program that the fans were there doing that for Tennessee, in which they've struggled so much at home. But to be able to defend the home court, the home turf, the home land, whatever you want to call it for any sport, is so important. But to do so for this Tennessee team this season, to defend Lindsey Nelson Stadium in the turf, you got to look at it and just, man, it's going to be tough going and play on the road now. After, just how emotional that was and emotional the weekend was. But just, you got to be really impressed with, guys like Manny Marin, who stepped up in a huge way. And what that means to, that guy, honestly, in that role, but also what that meant to Tennessee, because that was such a huge, important piece of this weekend for them.
Yeah, just his 3rd homer of the season when he launched that ball. And that was part of a 7-run inning for the Vols that, it made the difference in the baseball game.
But the questions around the pitching staff still, I mean,
there's plenty.
Doyle coming out on short rest. No other psycho, and I mean that respectfully, could probably do that as much as he could.
I mean, he's a psycho. There's no that's a team full of psychos, really, truly. I mean, all due respect, it's fun to watch, but yeah, Liam Doyle's crazy.
It's going to come down to the pitching staff, Chris. It's going to come down to the pitching staff again.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we'll talk about the Supers more on Thursday, but it does probably feel like a weekend where, here's the thing, and I don't think Tennessee fans would disagree. If it gets to a game 3, you're nervous. I mean, just beyond Doyle and Phillips, you get very, very nervous on the mound. You saw that in the third game of the regional. I mean, they lost the third game again. So, but obviously able to overcome it. I agree with you. I think being at home, using that emotion in a positive manner, it was fun to see it. I mean, this is a team that Tennessee, when things are going well, they're as fun to watch as anybody in college baseball. This is also, too, Harrison, I'll say it was a really entertaining kind of losers bracket. The battles that Cincinnati and Wake Forest were going back and forth.
Wake Forest and Miami of Ohio's game.
Yeah, 14-13. That one just nobody wanted to pitch at all. It was really entertaining in a lot of different ways, but the Vols obviously prevailing. Gritty, gutsy. I thought you saw obviously the character and the culture of Tennessee, and now they will advance and move on, and they've got a new challenge. It's SEC on SEC as we move, Harrison, and close it out with the Fayetteville Regional. The Arkansas Razorbacks. Ho-hum. There were really no dramatics in Fayetteville. Not a ton, at least. Not with Arkansas.
Arkansas wanted any. Don't worry.
No, they didn't want any at all. They took down North Dakota State 6-2, beat Creighton 12-1 on Saturday, and then on Sunday in the regional final, they beat Creighton again 8-3. Harrison, I think this is one you and I felt pretty good about that Arkansas was going to advance. Obviously, years past, some shortcomings in home regionals was something you thought about, but the matchup felt pretty good. That's exactly how it played out. Your thoughts, what we saw in Fayetteville?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, keep it short and sweet. Just Arkansas taking care of business and leaving the dramatics anywhere but the ballpark. Just going there and just not letting past teams, past season-ending ways or, failures or shortcomings matter or, have some value or importance this weekend in, defending the home turf and, playing at Baton and how important that is for Arkansas, how much that means to them, the fans, the coaches, everybody involved in, going there. I think they had a lot easier draw than some other regionals and other teams, I thought was really favorable. And, we said that going in for other teams, but I thought so a lot for Arkansas, honestly. So, because I thought there were better 2 seeds than Kansas, especially Kansas going 0-2, going 2-Q. Chris, I was really surprised by that, but I don't know. I think it was just Arkansas taking care of business on all fronts and just nothing that just dramatically stood out or challenged them as much as others teams. And I think that's a good thing for Arkansas. I don't think that they want that stress for sure, but I don't think that, it kind of helps them, in a way that doesn't tax them so much this weekend compared to what next weekend probably will be.
Yeah, I mean, again, I thought Arkansas was really impressive. They were glad, certainly, like you said, to not have the stresses and the anxiety that some others faced. And looking back now, hindsight's 2020, but it was pure domination by the Hogs. Hog Pen was obviously shaking too. Great crowds at Baum Walker all weekend. I think that crowd obviously elevated them. Kuhio Aloy continues to be the best player in college baseball. Probably should win the Golden Spikes. Yeah, player of the year for a reason. You could argue should win the Golden Spikes. And Kansas, Creighton, or North Dakota State really stood a chance against what I know you and I both believe is maybe the most complete team still in the country. And I know Hog fans looking at the rest of the field and who might be in Omaha with them, assuming they advance, feeling pretty good about their chances at a first national title. We will get Harrison, SEC on SEC, Arkansas, Tennessee in Fayetteville rematch of a series we got just a few weeks ago when Arkansas took 2 or 3. And again, we'll break that down in its entirety predicted on Thursday. So with that being said, Harrison, 4 SEC teams advanced the Super Regional round: Arkansas, Tennessee, LSU, and Auburn. And as we put a pin in it, Harrison, and close out the weekend, I will echo once again, excited about the 4 that are advancing. It was a eventful, stressful, anxiety-filled, and I will admit exhausting weekend as a fan of SEC baseball. and talking through it, all the teams that lost, so many of them that lost. I understand college baseball giveth and college baseball taketh, but man, bit of a brutal weekend. But again, this is why we love college baseball. And I said, Harrison, going in, you just pray to God it doesn't happen to your team. And unfortunately, it happened to 9 of the SEC teams that were part of the field. So
and Georgia Tech.
And Georgia Tech. Yeah, unfortunate. Harrison, any comments we got that we want to dive into? I know we've been going almost 2 hours now.
Nothing that I saw that really stuck out to me, but I do want to mention, I think this weekend kind of reiterated that college baseball postseason is the best format of any postseason in college sports.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's close. I really don't. I think that the regional round, because it could just be, a one and done, honestly, and it wouldn't be as exhilarating as fun, honestly. It wouldn't be what it is, the pedigree, the upsets, the storylines, the 3 seeds, the 4 seeds, in Murray State that it is. And baseball is a game of series. It always has been. I think it always will be, and it always should be in the postseason, in which, it's so much more exhilarating than just, one upset. You got to go through a weekend series of tournament, basically a mini tournament inside of a big tournament, which makes it so much more fun to watch. Then you get a series best of 3 in supers with super 16 teams, and then 8 in Omaha. Why have a Final 4 when you get a Final 8? I mean, come on. But on top of that, I think just a disappointing weekend for the SEC entirely. I think that's, predicated by the number 1 and 2 national seeds being SEC and losing their home regionals. But I think just a stressful weekend nonetheless for SEC across the board, the entire weekend, let alone having, 4 SEC teams in the super regionals.
Can I say this, Harrison? I think this weekend proved, if we're being honest with ourselves, that the SEC had a lot of good teams, but had few elite teams.
Few elite teams that stood the test of postseason, yeah, I guess you could say that. Or less than we expected or whatnot. But, I mean, Chris, does this also prove that maybe the days of NIL so far haven't affected things as much as we've thought?
Yeah, NIL and portal.
I mean, listen, I
had the take. Yeah, I had the take before the season. I thought that the Cinderella story was dead in college baseball. We'll see what the Omaha 8 looks like. We'll see if any of those mid-majors make it to Omaha. But, yeah, I mean, listen, they performed a lot better than I thought they would, just from the standpoint of – because you looked in the preseason, all these rosters that were compiled of mid-major guys that had transferred to SEC schools. Like we're talking about Utah Valley, for example. Well, who left Utah Valley? Danny Dickinson did, went to LSU. So, like, it's already so hard for these mid-majors to –
And they still beat Oregon.
And they still beat Oregon, right? So, like, it's hard for them to pull these upsets. And so, you're at least my school of thought is, like, hey, they keep losing their best players to the best teams. Well, the best teams are going to benefit, and we're not going to see as many upsets. And, I mean, my goodness, we saw – and that was prisoner of the moment. Everybody loves to say, like, this is the craziest, this is the best, this is the worst, this is the – I will say that this was one of the wackiest regional weekends I think we've ever seen. I mean, it was –
yeah, that I've ever covered or watched intensely. This is the most wild, adrenaline-filled regional weekend for me.
Yeah, all over the place. And also, guys, I want to say thank you so much. The regional weekend, massive success. Harrison traveling on the road. Us doing the live stream watch-along stuff. Again, in case you missed it, we were live for almost 9 hours on Friday watching baseball, which was pretty crazy. And then Monday night, of course, myself and Harrison and Jake chopping it up, watching all of the regional finals. Really good
6
stuff.
hours.
Yeah, more of that in store as we move into the super regional round. Just stay tuned, guys. Obviously, with the super regional schedule, things are going to be a little bit different, so we'll keep you updated with when we are going to be rocking and rolling. But we'll be live throughout the weekend. We'll be back on Thursday to talk the super regionals, preview, predict, all that good stuff, and break them down. Guys, in the meantime, again, appreciate you all tuning in. Really good stuff, as always, and excited to watch those 4 SEC teams compete in the super regionals. As
Chris,
always, guys, yeah, go ahead.
Initial reaction, biggest threat to the SEC claiming a 6th national championship in a row?
I'd probably still say North Carolina. I think they're probably the best team left that's not an SEC team.
I would say North Carolina too. I was hoping you'd go Florida State, but I'd say North Carolina right behind them, Florida State. But we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. It
could be a 6th different national champion from the SEC. Could be Arkansas. Could be Auburn.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, Harrison. The max number of teams the SEC can get in Omaha at this point is 3. I'm just praying to God it's going to be 3. That's all I'm saying.
Unfortunately, we do. Yeah, it's great that we're guaranteed one now. with Tennessee, Arkansas, but it sucks they're the same side, especially with LSU too, if they're able to reach the College World Series again.
Yeah, that's brutal. Anyways, though, we'll talk about all that and more, guys. Again, we appreciate you all tuning in. Make sure you like, subscribe, turn on notifications. Check us out via podcast. Wherever you get your podcast, you can also find us across all social media platforms as well as our website, secunfiltered.com. And by the way, make sure you check out our friends over at FanDuel, because as always, we're brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, guys. Baseball season is finally here. The wait is over. You can start the season strong on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, FanDuel celebrates the return of baseball by giving new customers $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel's got so many ways for you to get in on the action, from hits to steals to home runs. They got a lineup filled with all your favorite bets, or if pitching is more of your thing, FanDuel has a deep bullpen of bets from strikeouts to shutout innings. So when you place your first bet, it can be almost anything, and if it hits, you'll get $250 in bonus bets. And guys, you can bet on the Supers, you can bet on the College World Series, of course, you can bet on Major League Baseball, whatever you want to bet on. Just make sure you visit FanDuel.com/SECU to join today. That's FanDuel.com/SECU. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official partners of Major League Baseball. Guys, for Harrison Fant, I'm Chris Phillips. This is The Windup, SEC Unfiltered's bi-weekly college baseball show, the best college baseball show on the internet. We'll be back on Thursday to preview, predict, and break down the upcoming Super Regionals. Until then, y'all take care. Appreciate each and every single one of y'all tuning in, and we'll catch you all on the other side.